Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Office Bloke Daz.
I'm Gaynor.
Office Bloke Aidan.
We all three of us together. If Patreon's your thing, check out the link in the description below. Loads of stuff on there. Starts just $3 a month, helps support the channel. Full watch-alongs to things like Modern Family.
Office for Family.
Office for Family, yeah.
Loads of stuff, mate.
Yeah, we've just started the new series of The Quarterback as well, so it's 2 seasons.
That's really
on there,
good.
so check it out if it's for you.
Yep.
How Canada quietly holds America's survival hostage and nobody notices.
Ooh.
Be interesting. I didn't know this.
No, I didn't.
Something new to me.
I'm sure the comments is going to be going
Let's see how this goes.
crazy.
Everyone thinks America protects Canada, but Canada actually controls America's survival. And most Americans have no idea. But here's what nobody talks about. Canada quietly holds the keys to 3 things that could bring America to its knees overnight. I'm about to show you why geography made Canada the most powerful country America can never conquer, and why every US president secretly fears the day Canada figures this out. Look, when most people think about US-Canada relations, they picture America as the big brother protecting little Canada. The US has 10 times Canada's population, 15 times the military budget, and the world's most powerful economy. But here's the thing about geography. It doesn't care about your military budget. And Canada sits on top of 3 geographic advantages so powerful that they could theoretically shut down half of America without firing a single shot. The craziest part? Most Canadians don't even realize the power they're sitting on. Therefore, they've never used it. But geography doesn't lie. And the numbers I'm about to show you will change how you see North America forever.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yep.
Let's start with the most terrifying one: water. Canada controls 20% of the world's fresh water. That's more than any other country on Earth. But here's where it gets scary for America. The Great Lakes system, which provides drinking water to 40 million Americans, flows through Canada. Therefore, let me paint you a picture. Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, all of these connect through Canadian territory. The St. Lawrence Seaway that carries this water to the Atlantic runs right through Quebec. But it gets even worse. The Niagara River that connects Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, Canadian border. The Detroit River connecting Lake Huron to Lake Erie, Canadian border. Canada could theoretically control the water supply to Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, and dozens of other major American cities. And we're not just talking about drinking water. The Great Lakes system powers hydroelectric plants that provide electricity to millions of Americans. It's the shipping route that carries iron ore from Minnesota to steel plants in Pennsylvania. Therefore, if Canada ever decided to restrict water flow through their territory, they could shut down American steel production, cut power to major cities, and create the worst water crisis in US history. But here's the geographic nightmare that keeps Pentagon planners awake at night. America can't do anything about it. You can't invade Canada to secure water rights. The border is 5,500 miles long, longer than the distance from New York to London. And most of it runs through wilderness that would make Afghanistan look like a parking lot. Therefore, America's entire industrial heartland depends on water that flows through a country they can't control and can't conquer. The geographic reality is simple. Canada holds America's most vital resource hostage, and there's nothing America can do about it except hope Canada stays friendly.
Fair enough.
But water is just the beginning. Let's talk about energy. Canada supplies 20% of America's electricity. That's enough power for the entire state of California. But here's where the geography gets really interesting. Most of this power comes from hydroelectric dams in Quebec and British Columbia, and it all flows south through a handful of transmission lines that cross the border at very specific geographic points. Therefore, Canada could theoretically black out the entire northeastern United States just by flipping a few switches. But it gets worse. Canada is also America's largest oil supplier. They send 4 million barrels of oil per day to the US through pipelines that run from Alberta to refineries in Texas, Illinois, and Oklahoma. And here's the geographic choke point that should terrify every American. Most of this oil flows through a single pipeline system called Enbridge. If Canada ever shut down Enbridge, gas prices in America would double overnight. Therefore, the entire American economy would grind to a halt. But here's what makes this even more dangerous. Canada's energy infrastructure is designed to flow south. The geography forces it. The Canadian Shield, that massive granite formation that covers half of Canada, creates natural barriers that funnel energy resources toward the US border. Therefore, Canada's entire energy economy is built around supplying America. But that also means Canada has built the perfect geographic weapon without even realizing it. And unlike oil from the Middle East that has to cross oceans, Canadian energy flows through pipelines and power lines that are impossible to defend. The US-Canada border crosses mountains, forests, and wilderness areas where a small team could sabotage critical infrastructure and disappear without a trace. Therefore, America's energy security depends on 5,500 miles of undefended border running through some of the most remote terrain on Earth. But here's the really crazy part. This geographic vulnerability is getting worse, not better. As America transitions to renewable energy, they're becoming even more dependent on Canadian hydroelectric power. And as American oil production shifts to harder-to-extract sources, Canadian oil becomes more critical. Therefore, every year that passes, Canada's geographic stranglehold on American energy gets tighter.
Quite interesting, isn't it? The way,
Yeah.
the way this is put across. I mean, I know there's always ways around certain things.
Yeah.
But that is the infrastructure that you've got in place already. Really does. It's very Canadian dependent,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
of course it is.
This is if what they're saying in it
Yeah,
is,
it's true.
if it's 100% accurate.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure it's not probably far away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know oil's there, but I didn't realise the energy that's provided for electricity and stuff. 20% of that comes from Canada as well.
No, I didn't.
It's a hell of a lot. Interesting this.
But the most dangerous geographic advantage Canada has over America is one most people have never heard of: the Arctic. Climate change is melting the polar ice cap, and that's opening up new shipping routes through the Arctic Ocean. Therefore, these routes could become the most important trade highways in the world. And guess who controls access to them? Canada. The Northwest Passage, the Arctic shipping route that connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, runs entirely through Canadian territorial waters. Therefore, Canada could theoretically control shipping between Asia and Europe, cutting America out of the most lucrative trade routes on the planet. But here's where the geography gets really interesting. The Arctic isn't just about shipping, it's about resources. The Arctic Ocean contains an estimated 13% of the world's oil reserves and 30% of its natural gas. And most of the land-based access to these resources runs through Canadian territory. Therefore, as the ice melts and these resources become accessible, Canada will control access to some of the largest untapped energy reserves on Earth. But it gets even more strategic. The Arctic is becoming the new front line in the competition between America, Russia, and China. Russia is building military bases across their Arctic coastline. China is investing billions in Arctic shipping infrastructure. And America? America has to ask Canada for permission to access most of the Arctic. Therefore, Canada sits between America and the most strategically important region of the 21st century. But here's the geographic nightmare scenario that keeps military planners awake. What if Canada ever aligned with China or Russia?
Yeah.
China is already Canada's second largest trading partner. They're investing heavily in Canadian mining and energy companies. And they're building infrastructure to ship Canadian resources directly to Asia through the Arctic. Therefore, Canada could theoretically cut America out of Arctic trade entirely and redirect their resources to China instead. And there's nothing America could do about it. The Arctic is too remote to invade, too vast to control, and too important to ignore. Therefore, America's future dominance depends on a country they can't control maintaining access to a region they can't reach. But there's one more geographic advantage that makes Canada truly dangerous: critical minerals. Canada controls massive reserves of lithium, cobalt, nickel, and rare earth elements. These are the materials that power electric car batteries, solar panels, and wind turbines. Therefore, as America transitions to renewable energy, they're becoming completely dependent on Canadian minerals. But here's where the geography creates a perfect storm. Most of these minerals are located in northern Canada, the same remote regions that are impossible to defend and impossible to invade. And China knows this. They're already investing billions in Canadian mining operations, buying up mineral rights, and building infrastructure to ship these materials directly to Asia. Therefore, Canada could wake up one day and realize they control the materials that power the global economy. But here's the really scary part for America. Canada doesn't need American permission to sell these minerals to China. The geography works in China's favor. Arctic shipping routes make it cheaper to ship Canadian minerals to Asia than to American factories. Therefore, market forces are already pulling Canadian resources away from America. And if America ever tried to pressure Canada to restrict mineral exports to China, Canada could retaliate by cutting off water, energy, or Arctic access. Therefore, America is trapped in a geographic dependency they can't escape and can't control. Now, you might be thinking, but Canada would never use these advantages against America. They're allies. And you're probably right. But here's the thing about geography. It doesn't care about current politics. Alliances change, governments change, but geography is forever. And as Canada becomes more aware of their geographic advantages, they're starting to use them. Look at the recent disputes over Arctic sovereignty. Canada is asserting control over Arctic shipping routes and charging fees for passage. Look at the energy sector. Canada is building pipelines to ship oil to Asia instead of America, reducing their dependence on US markets. Therefore, Canada is slowly realizing they don't need America as much as America needs them. And climate change is accelerating this shift. As the Arctic opens up, Canada gains access to new markets and new resources that don't require American cooperation. Therefore, the geographic balance of power in North America is shifting, and most Americans have no idea it's happening. So the next time someone says America protects Canada, remember, geography tells a different story. Canada controls America's water, energy, Arctic access, and critical minerals. In other words, it quietly holds more power over America's future than any other country on Earth. And the wildest part? Most Canadians don't even realize it. But geography doesn't lie. And in the game of global power, the one who controls the resources controls the future. America may have the bigger military, but Canada has something even stronger: geography. If you thought Canada was just the friendly neighbor up north, think again. This is just the beginning. I'm diving deep into how geography shapes power, conflict, and survival across the globe. And trust me, the next twist will blow your mind. So hit subscribe and stay tuned. The next episode might just change the way you see the world map forever.
I like that channel already.
Yeah. It's very interesting, isn't it?
It is, but I think once you've got the power of spend as well, like America has, with the size of the economy and the way it buys in products, I think, things people like Saudi Arabia have got access to, probably the biggest oil reserves in the world.
Yeah.
So you purchase them from Saudi Arabia as opposed to Canada. So there's always options available. The only option they don't really have available there is shipping lanes. Which the USA do have access to.
Yeah.
Just not the Arctic shipping lane.
Yeah.
But didn't they find like the biggest like cobalt or lithium mines in the USA? The biggest reserves in the USA, like in Nevada or somewhere like that.
I remember that.
We watched a video on it, didn't we?
Yeah.
We found this massive reserve here. Idaho, maybe, was it? Somewhere
No,
like
it was
that?
somewhere like Utah or Nevada, that area.
Yeah. And it was like,
Maybe
they were
Arizona.
just invested in it now to sort of like build things like that. But I know Canada's definitely, you don't get a country of that size without having power.
No.
For sure, sort of thing. And they've got, like he says there, they've got geographical power with what they've got with most of that's always been snow-capped and frozen seas that you can't get through, sort of thing. But if the climate change is making it a way where it is opening routes out and you can put shipping lanes down there, then it's going to become a big player into global trade.
Yeah.
But again, that global trade opens up if Canada are charging for it, and there's other routes as well. You can go the southern routes, but it depends on timing and all that kind of stuff. But it's definitely interesting because Canada, by the sounds of that, Canada's got quite a lot of reserves, and it could be potentially become quite a big, global sort of like player in the market.
Yeah.
But very interesting. Cause
Yeah.
it does hold a lot of cards, doesn't it, over the USA when you think about it.
It's like I said, they don't know.
But at the same time, just Canada is sitting duck if anything happens there with the size of the military. They might be able to turn it off against the USA, or do they need the USA's help if there was an invasion into Canada?
Yeah.
Which wouldn't be easy anyway. As we've looked at that before.
Yeah.
An invasion of Canada would be very difficult. I don't think the USA would allow that anyway.
No.
Because they wouldn't want their reserves turning off anyway from someone like China or Russia.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like stuff like that. Hope you guys enjoyed that as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.